Grace and peace to everyone tuning in this fine day. A reading from the 9th chapter of Matthew. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and curing every disease and every sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed, they were helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." And Jesus summoned his 12 disciples, gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out, to cure every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, also known as Peter, his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew, the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon of the Cananean, and Judas Iscariot, the one who betrayed him. These 12 Jesus sent out with the following instructions: "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. As you go, proclaim the good news. The good news, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the leopard, cast out demons. You received without payment, give without payment. Take no gold or silver or copper in your belt, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for laborers deserve their food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who in it is worthy. Stay there until you leave. And as you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. If it's not worthy, let your peace return to you. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. Truly I tell you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. See, I'm sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of them, for they will hand you over to councils. They'll flog you in their synagogues. You will be dragged before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. And when they hand you over, do not worry about how you are to speak. Don't worry about what you are to say. For what you are to say will be given to you at that time. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of the Father speaking through you. Brother will betray brother to death, a father his child, and children will rise against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I tell you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes." Here ends our reading. As I said, we're so grateful you have joined us here at Good Shepherd this week to hear a word of hope, a word of love, I hope, of grace, but also one of restoration, one of reconciliation and resurrection. I hope that because I need that word this week, truly. I bet I don't speak for just myself when I say I'm tired. I'm tired of all this, tired of COVID. I'm tired of the changes that it has caused. I'm tired of the death that has ensued. I'm tired of uncertainty. Add to that, I'm very tired of hearing about another person who is killed by someone in a position of power, by people entrusted with their care and safety. I'm tired of divisive rhetoric. I'm tired of election talk, because I'm really just tired of the state of all things, it seems. I'm tired. I need fuel. I need to be fed. I need to be reminded that what this is, what we're doing together as a community of faith, is worthy. And the mission is noble. The victory is secured. So I seek out the promise of God, and I'm grateful for the passage that we are given this week. Last week, we heard from Pastor Heidi about our marching orders to go make disciples, and I am encouraged. Let's do that. Let's go be the people in the world that God called us and made us to be. Let's do that. This week, we get some specifics of how that's going to look and how it plays out that I am eternally grateful for, because I think it's very pointed and relevant for us now. Especially for those of you who, like me, can feel overwhelmed or tired by the injustices in the world. Overwhelmed by this sneaking and occasional sense of worthlessness or unworthiness for the call that's been placed upon us in this time, in history, in this place. And even for those of you who may feel indifferent or numb to all that's going on. Our passage today begins with a scene where Jesus sees all of this. The crowd. He looks over the crowds, he looks over the people who have gathered to hear him speak and teach, and he sees people who are struggling. People who need leadership. He sees people without a shepherd. He sees sheep, and regardless of what you might think of yourself as a sheep, what kind of sheep you are, Jesus sees the crowd. And it says he has compassion for them. Disciples, he says, we've got to do something. Go to them. Remind them of what we're doing here. Remind them of for the reason we have been made. Remind them what the point of this is. Remind them of what God is meaning to do in the midst of God's people. Remind them of God's hope. Show them what God is capable of in this new kingdom of heaven. And I'm so grateful that Jesus sees all this confusion and sense of being directionless, and he has sympathy. He looks and says, let's get out there and tell the story. Proclaim the gospel. Make disciples. Marching orders, right? Maybe you're like me and sometimes you say, yeah, obviously I hear that. I understand I'm called to be a person of peace. I recognize I'm supposed to advocate for those who are on the margins. I look out for people who are being trampled upon. Obviously, the person on the Samaritan road who helps the person on the side of it who's been abused. I get lifting up the lowly. I get that I should be giving voice to the voiceless. But these days, in these current events, these debates that range of politics, religion, race, particularly everything that we don't want to talk about in polite conversation, it feels so hairy to do it. Because I don't want to presume or offend. Maybe you're saying to yourself, I don't know if I'm that good at talking about this kind of thing. I mean, am I the right person to do that? Truthfully, am I going to change anyone's mind on this? Do I really think my words are going to transform someone's way of thinking on matters of race or systemic political woes? Is it even worth it to speak? To try to be a peacemaker in the midst of such violence? Of course it's worth it, Jesus would say. You're right, though. The truth is, this gospel isn't going to land everywhere that you preach it. There are powers, there are systems, and groups that do not have any interest in a message of death and resurrection. Most folks don't want to die, don't want something to be destroyed for something new to be made. The folks who worked at the temple were very much not interested in Jesus' message of tearing it down so that it could be rebuilt again in 3 days. In fact, they were so opposed to it that when Jesus made such a claim, he was quickly arrested, he was quickly tried, and he was quickly executed by the state. Sometimes there are ears, there are eyes that don't want to hear or see the gospel. He says, well, that's part of the gig. It isn't going to be easy. In fact, Jesus doesn't even hate the people who execute him. He later says, forgive them. They don't understand what they're doing. They're blind. So how do we do this? How do we go out there amongst wolves, perils, pitfalls, and fulfill our marching orders? Do this discipleship thing. Proclaim the gospel. That's why I say I like this reading. Jesus has some tips. He's got some tricks to this thing. There are techniques to avoid being trampled on or devoured by them. He says, be as wise as serpents. and be as innocent as doves. So one, he says, you don't speak of your own wisdom, of your own virtue, of your own mission. You speak of the kingdom. You have my words. I will give them to you. My Father's words. The one who formed the cosmos has said this. Use those words. And honestly, in using those words, Jesus' teachings, recognize you aren't in the business of convincing someone. You're in the business of proclamation, boldly declaring in daring confidence that Jesus is Lord, that victory is secured through life and love. You're in the business of proclaiming through word and deed that the kingdom of God is present. And what it looks like here and now are the ways of peace and restoration and reconciliation and repentance, because it's coming here and now. It can be witnessed in your ways. It can be witnessed in your words and your actions. So, as ambassadors of the kingdom of heaven, in a time where you may feel very vulnerable, know this. It's not always going to land, the gospel. But this mission, this thing you're proclaiming, is not just your own. It's a mission from God for the sake of not just you and yours, but for the whole world, sheep and wolves, all of us. Not just some Pollyanna idea that we cooked up, but the very hope of creation. It is good. So perhaps it's in your own home. You hear that family member or that friend of yours who is proclaiming with great conviction that sentiment that, some people are less than others, or some people should just behave this way or that way because that's how I was raised, that's how you should do it. Maybe you have that person in your family who carries no small amount of prejudice towards people of color, towards people of different religions or political persuasions, people who have angered them or hurt them in some form or fashion they believe. Maybe that person is in a position of authority over you. And you may be afraid to speak of this kingdom, to speak up and say, this isn't of the kingdom. This isn't the hope of all creation. You may feel in saying that is too divisive. Well, Jesus says, be wise as a serpent. Don't let yourself be trampled, but do speak honestly and truthfully as a dove that knows this may hurt, but the sacrifice of my own comfort isn't about hurting someone else. It's not about embarrassing people for what might be for them unrecognized prejudice. It's not the ambassador's purpose to express your great anger, outrage, and animosity towards them. Because I can tell you from experience, meeting prejudice with anger really does just grow anger. We don't want to posture ourselves as a viper, but as a dove. With serpent-like wisdom and in the innocence of a dove, we state in love and honesty. But these words do not align with the hopes revealed in the teachings of Jesus Christ. And by that I mean they don't model humility. They don't model the words of a peacemaker. And that as someone who cares for them, you hope to mend that divide between you. That's ambassador work. That's lovingly seeking to forgive and say, brother, sister, these words are not of the kingdom. They are words of supremacy, and they hurt our neighbor. They are words of divisiveness, and they are born of prejudice. Still feels scary, though, right? Still feels like it's just not polite to talk about these matters. Perhaps it's too political. Fair. But being a gospel proclaimer, being an ambassador of the kingdom is political. It just doesn't need to be partisan. Unless that is to say, they are on the side of our teacher. They advocate, they speak, they proclaim, they serve at the will of their Lord, and in our case, the kingdom of heaven, Prince of Peace, the Good Shepherd. So do we seek division when we speak of the kingdom? No. We seek forgiveness. We seek restoration. We acknowledge there are repairs that need to take place amidst broken places in our communities. Will all places want to be repaired? Nope. Not always. But if we approach these places of division, pain, and brokenness with hearts, not to destroy, but with hearts to mend, we align our words and ways to our teacher. And just from a quick glance, Jesus' teachings are very challenging, but undoubtedly, consistently, they are very good news for all those who suffer. To quote Pastor Rick Barger in a post he made on his blog this week, look at Jesus' own declared agenda. Look at his speeches. Look at those with whom he dined and with whom he embraced. It's the marginalized, the vilified. Look at the systems of injustice to which he spoke. Woes to. Those of us who are rich, woe to you. Those who have comfort, woe to you. Those who have received so much while others go hungry. Jesus was, in essence, a protester. His Sermon on the Mount announced a change of affairs, a reordering of society. First last, last first, hungry fed, comfort given. He writes, his entry into Jerusalem was a protest march. All hail the new king, right? His attack on the temple, he writes, was a demonstration. Right? You remember, you will not use my Father's house, my Father's provision, my Father's promise to enrich yourself at the expense of our neighbors. This is not an exchange. He writes, he took the side of the poor, the powerless, and the disenfranchised. He spoke truth to power, and like many before him, he was lynched by both the government and religious people. When I hear that, I think, if that were the end of his story, I'd be totally justified in saying, I'm too tired, I'm not up for it, I'm not the person God has asked to be an ambassador. But that isn't the end of his story, is it? Far from it. Jesus didn't just get executed. His mission didn't just dissolve. God raised him up. He rose again because love and life for all people, it will win. That's the promise that's secured. And because of that, we can resist the sense of powerlessness, that sense of being overwhelmed, which can quickly and dangerously turn to indifference, apathy, and defeat. So we resist by being ambassadors and by speaking the truth. There is a spirit blowing through the world right now. It's always been there, but boy, howdy, I just feel it's blowing strong now as people take to the streets and begin to say, I'm ready for the hard work of resurrection. I want to mend. The way things were don't have to be the way they'll be always. Young and old, black and white, they're being summoned to this movement, this clarion call, and the ambassadors of the Good Shepherd, who was crucified and risen out of a sense of love for sheep, and even sheep who behave like wolves, that Good Shepherd, and that Good Shepherd's ambassadors truly have something to say. So let's speak truth. Peace. Amen.